Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today is going to be a fun two-part series with Kevin Wilkey, the Marketing Development Director at KUIU. And Kevin is known for being kind of an archery guru. He is a world-class archer, shot professionally for many, many years. And it's always great to lean on his expertise. We're going to be answering a bunch of podcast listener and Instagram follower questions about archery. So it's going to be really fun to dive into that. I want to thank you guys for your support of this podcast. Without you guys, it wouldn't be possible. I really appreciate interacting with you guys. If you want to send me a message, you can do so on Instagram at JScottOutdoors. Just send me a direct message. You can also send me an email at jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. Guys, we're kind of mid-June here. All of us are gearing up for these fall hunts. We've got July and August to kind of prepare. A bunch of these hunts will start in August. And then, of course, we've got, our elk seasons, which will be pretty much running through the month of September. So it's an exciting time of year. We've got a lot of cool stuff coming for you guys here on the podcast. I want to thank the following sponsors of this podcast. I want to thank GoHunt.com. My friend Cody Nelson, the glassing guru, he is the optics authority. He's the optics manager over at GoHunt.com gear shop. If you guys have any interest in purchasing any optics, anything to do with glassing, tripods, binoculars, spotting scopes, rifle scopes, rangefinders, you name it, give Cody a call at 702-847-8747. That's extension 2. You can also email him directly at optics@gohunt.com. Also, his cell phone is 602-399-3699. You can shoot him a text or call him on his cell. He loves to talk glassing, loves to talk optics, so give Cody a call. Also want to tell you guys about the Go Hunt Insider. Go to gohunt.com/JScott to sign up. You're going to get a $50 Go Hunt Gear Shop gift card just for signing up. GoHunt.com has quickly become the resource and the place for all of the information in regards to Western hunting applications, draw odds, statistics. Here we are waiting on the Arizona draw for Arizona sheep, and it's an exciting time. Go check out Go Hunt Insider. Go to gohunt.com/JScott and sign up. I also want to thank KUIU Ultralight Hunting. Obviously, I'm doing this podcast with Kevin Wilkey, and KUIU has been a big part of this podcast. It's the gear that I wear on all of my hunts. Go to KUIU.com. That's KUIU.com to order directly. It's a direct-to-consumer model, so you can get everything on the website. And I also want to thank Phonescope.com. Use the JScott20 promo code to get a 10% discount on all orders. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy these two episodes with Kevin Wilkey. Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have Kevin Wilkey of KUIU. He's the Marketing Development Director. How you doing, Kevin?
Fantastic. Having a good day so far.
We had such great response from our podcast, our Q&A archery podcast that we did with you, about a month ago. I needed to get you back on here, and everybody's, gearing up and finding out about the draws and getting all fired up for the fall season. Everyone's, tuning their bows and, buying new bows and getting everything dialed in. So I thought this was a perfect time to kind of jump back in and answer a bunch of archery related questions. Before we do that, right before the podcast we went live, you were talking about not drawing Wyoming and kind of bummed out about that. It sounds like the point creep got you.
Yeah, the last 3 years I thought I'd have a chance, and sitting on 7 points right now. And last year 7 was 100%, and this year it wasn't. So I have a good friend, he drew with 7, and if I would have gone like the high dollar tag, I would have been okay. But so last year my brother and I put in together. He has 1 more point than I do, and we didn't draw. So I thought, well, let's just do it separate this year. And he drew and I didn't. But we probably would have been okay if we would have gone together. But anyway, it'll be fun to help him. And but yeah, always next year.
Kevin, we talked a little bit about your background on the last podcast, but for those that haven't listened to that, talk about not only your hunting, background with bow and archery equipment, but your competitive shooting and your expertise in tuning bows and shooting competitively, and how that's kind of got you to where you're at now. Talk a little bit about that background.
Yeah, so I started competing in archery at a young age, just at the local 3D ranges when 3D in Utah was getting popular, or just 3D period was started getting popular in the 90s, early 90s. And so I grew up at the archery range, and we bow hunted as a family. And my first real job was at the archery shop. And I managed an archery shop in Utah for like 6 years. And then while I was doing that, I was hitting every match and 3D shoot I could go to. And then I went to work for Hoyt, and I worked there for about 10 years. And at the time, I was our pro staff manager. And I would oversee like a whole pro team that would compete. And I was also competing at the same time. So, I would be going to these events competing and also working the trade show booth there for Hoyt. And then I worked for Gold Tip and Bee Stinger Archery for about 4 years as a sales rep. So switched from a marketing role to sales role, and I did that, for 4 years. And I've been with KUIU now for a little over a year, back into a marketing position. So anyway, my work experience has kind of paralleled my shooting along the line. And, I've competed on the U.S. World Team 2 times. I've made the team 3 times. I didn't go the last time, and my son was born like as they blew the whistle for the World Championships to start. I was at the hospital with my wife, of course. But anyway, the other 2 world teams that I made, I won a gold medal at the World Games. That was held in Taiwan. The World Games are held like every year after the Olympics. They're managed by the same governing body that manages the Olympics, and so it's kind of like the little brother to the Olympics. And field archery was one of the sports there, and won a gold medal doing that. And the next year, the next time I made the team was for the World Championships, and we shot that in Hungary, and I ended up with a silver medal there. And besides that, I've competed around the nation and state levels, and I've racked up quite a few podium finishes over the years. And I wasn't like, there was a handful of guys that were just cream of the crop, but I was always at their heels nipping at them, and working a full-time job and raising a family at the same time, and competing against guys that are doing it full-time as a living. It's a pretty tough sport to be, to get to the top end. And I did that for a while, and kind of taking a step back at this time and just enjoying archery and hunting more, and mainly just shooting local tournaments and, whatever national tournaments are here in the West. So, but yeah, man, I love working on bows and shooting them, and anything that goes along with bow hunting, man, I'm all about it.
That's awesome. And yeah, I got so much great feedback from the last podcast and the knowledge that you have. So I'm excited to go through some of these questions today. We've got a bunch of questions here on bowstrings. So we're going to kind of make this part of the podcast about bowstrings, because there's just a bunch of questions. I think you had some stuff you also wanted to cover as well, so I thought that would be a perfect kind of transition here into our Q&A. So let's just dive into it.
Yeah, and to offer up a little background on strings, like I started building my own bowstrings when I was like 10, 11 years old. Like my brother and I made a jig, and we started building strings from early age. And while I worked at the pro shop, I built strings for the shop, and I was always just looking for that extra edge as a competitor. Like I could just always make them a little bit better than what you could buy them. And then my experience of working at Hoyt, where we build thousands of bowstrings, and being involved in that testing process. So very passionate about it. I still today in my little archery shop, personal archery shop, I've got like every tool under the sun to work on a bow, and we've got some real high-end bowstring building equipment here, just for kind of like me and family and friends. I don't really sell them, but man, they're it's just fun. It's like a guy that ties his own flies, really passionate about it. I'm that way with my bowstrings.
That's awesome. A question here from Liver's Edge. He says, when or how often should you replace your bowstrings?
Great question. I think a lot of people are looking for X amount of shots equals when you should replace. But realistically, you could wear out a bowstring in 5 shots, and you can have them last tens of thousands of shots. So how often you should replace it's not like, getting your oil changed every 3,000 miles kind of thing. Like you really just have to pay attention to how they look. There's a lot of visual indicators as to whether a string is worn. I look at the servings. The serving is the protective wrap that goes around the string fibers. And you'll find that serving on sections around the cams, roller guard, and where your arrow clicks onto the string. That protective wrap is the serving. So what I look for is separation, or it'll get flattened out. Like you'll see that it just starts unraveling. A bow with improper cam alignment, will wear out a string way quicker than a bow with really good alignment. Same thing like tires on your car. Like you have a set of 50,000 mile tires, but if your front end's out of alignment, you're going to wear them out really quick. So strings are kind of similar in that aspect, that those servings can wear out kind of quick if your cams are out of alignment. The next thing I look at are the individual fibers. So each bowstring is made up of, depending on the material, anywhere from like 24 to 32 strands of one material. Sometimes 2 different colors, but it's all kind of the same material. And each one of those individual strands has hundreds of fibers that make up one strand. And in their manufacturing process, those bundles, or the single strand bundle, is kind of waxed and held together. Now as your string wears, like typically what wears down those fibers is contact or friction. So that contact can come from, like, as you're hiking, you're walking down the trail and your bowstrings, you're holding your bow in your hand and you're kind of walking along and your bowstring's rubbing back and forth on your pant leg. Like I can pick that a mile away. It's usually on one side of the bowstring. You can tell what hand the guy carries his bow in by what side of the string's super fuzzy. Or when you strap your bow to a backpack, if your straps are rubbing on those strings, it'll wear them out super quick. Waxing the string, surprisingly, will make a string go fuzzy really quick. I know this is like a super controversial topic. My take on string care is a little different than others, but let's say, like here in Utah, and I know Arizona, some of these western states are quite dry and dusty. Well, let's say you take some bowstring wax and smear it down the side of your nice paint on your pickup truck. We'll go drive around on a dirt road for a week and see what happens. Like, what's going to happen to that wax?
There's going to be dust caked to it.
Yeah, it's just going to get dust caked to it. So imagine your bowstrings being like that, and then what do? You apply more wax over the top of it. So you're rubbing those grit and fiber. Imagine what would happen to your paint finish if you were to take your fingers and rub it in, rub all that sand and grit back into the finish. It'll scratch it. That's what it's going to break down those fibers. And then, so let's say you wipe all that wax off and then reapply new wax. It's just still, even removing that wax, and then rubbing your fingers up and down your bowstring, it breaks down those fibers. Now, most people will look at a bowstring and they'll see that it's fuzzy, and immediately their first reaction is like, you need to wax that string. Well, the wax doesn't fix anything. Like, all it does is lay those fibers down. Those fibers are broken, discontinued pieces of the bowstring, and so they fuzz up. So the wax doesn't magically reconnect them. It just lays them back down and makes them look pretty, but you haven't done anything to add to the strength of the bowstring. So me personally, I never wax my bowstrings ever. Like, as I'm going through my building process, of building the string, a lot of the wax gets stripped off. I'll burnish them one time. And when I say burnish, I'll wrap like a really soft Dacron piece of material around the string, and I'll just kind of pull it tight and then slide it down the string really gently. And it just lays everything down nice, tight into a bundle. And then I'll never wax them again. If they do collect a little bit of dust, which is normal, I'll take kind of like a wet wipe or something, not a super, you just want something really gentle that you can wipe the string off and keep it clean. But anyway, that's a lot of info all at once about how often to change your bowstrings. But it depends on how good of a job you can do at not letting them brush up against things, and how well. And it's like anything, if you're dragging it through the brush, and it'll wear out really quick.
Early on, you were kind of talking about the materials. What materials are used to make bowstrings?
It's a great question. So the individual fibers are typically a Dyneema blend. So you got two different types. So two core types. There are three manufacturers that make bowstring materials. If there's more than that and I forget them, I apologize. So you got BCY, Brownell, and then Bloodline. So if you look at all three of those manufacturers, they make basically two core types of string material. You've got a 100% Dyneema. Now, Dyneema it's used in a lot of different applications. So like its number one application would be on like sailboats and ships. Like all the ropes that they use, they're made out of Dyneema. So the material, like, I want to say it's like 20 times stronger than steel. It wears really well. Like, and it doesn't require
is it a natural fiber, or is it a synthetic?
No, it's a UWHMPE, like a polypropylene. I'm probably butchering it. Like, I'd have to look at it to know exactly what it is, but it's a synthetic material.
Okay.
Apologize for all you guys that really know your stuff about that kind of thing. Like, I've like learned about it at times, but it's like not one of those things that's on the tip of my tongue all the time. But it's a synthetic material, and it's impervious, meaning that like you get chemical on it, it won't, like, it doesn't actually need the wax for lubrication or anything. Like it's fine just without it. So like at KUIU, we use Dyneema in our backpacks. Like the bags is a Dyneema blend. So we don't ever wax our backpacks to have them hold together. Like it's just not necessary for the Dyneema. And so the other material that those three manufacturers use are also, it's a Dyneema blended with a Vectran. So the Vectran blended materials are like your 452X that I'm sure anybody that's ever looked into bowstrings have heard. Vectran it's really an abrasive material, but it's super strong and it doesn't stretch. So they put a little bit of that into each fiber, and that's what gives it its no creep or no stretch. So I guess you're probably wondering, like, what are the pros and cons of both? So a 100% Dyneema bowstring is really soft on the shot. They're really quiet. But if you happen to go with like a lower grade of the material, it seems to want to stretch out a lot over time. Like it'll just continue to stretch and stretch. But some of the later version, like the most recent versions of like, and everybody kind of calls it a different name, but like the SK99s are like the highest end grade of Dyneema you can get right now. I've had really good luck with them. Super quiet. They don't seem to stretch much. They have a little bit more elasticity to them. than like a Vectran blend. And they're really durable. So the upside to a Vectran blended material is that they just don't stretch, man. Like once you get them settled in and shot in, like hot day, cold day, whatever, like they don't move. But they typically don't last as long because that Vectran is very abrasive, and it also will make your bow a little bit louder since it doesn't have as much stretch or suspension to it, I guess. It's just a little bit harder on the string. So in my experience, they haven't lasted as long as like a 100% Dyneema blend.
Explain to people why your bowstring stretching is a problem.
Great point. So on some bows, it's a bigger problem than others. Like single cam bows, like not really many companies are even building a single cam anymore. But so the center of a single cam bowstring is like at the top of the wheel. So when something stretches out, it stretches from the center outward, right? So with your knocking point and your D-loop and your peep not being centered on the string, when that string stretches or elongates, your peep and your D-loop and everything will change its position. So that changes the tune of the bow and also your sight settings. Your sight marks will completely change. On a bow that's not a single cam, it's still a problem. Like let's say your string started out at 55.5 inches and then it grew a half inch. Your draw length, of course, is going to be longer, and it'll gain poundage. So your bow is sped up on you. So that'll also change your sight marks and your sight settings. If your cables stretch, and they typically don't stretch at the same rate of shooting string versus a cable on the bow. If your cables stretch, your cams can go out of sync. You can also lose poundage. So if a cable stretches, your poundage goes down, draw length gets shorter, and they don't all do it at the same rate. So, it's just, you can take a perfectly sighted in, tuned bow, all the strings stretch, everything changes.
Question here from Pick 6 Outdoors. Is there a better string for longer draw lengths, or is it a universal application?
They're not really specific to draw length. There are quite a few specifics. It kind of depends on the manufacturer and the brand of the bow and the cam type. But typically, like when you look at it wouldn't matter on draw length. Like if a guy's got a long draw length, he's still going to go with the same. It would be the same type of string as it would be on a shorter, same model on a shorter draw length. They would share a similar type of string, even though his cams may be bigger for a longer draw length. It wouldn't. There's not like a size specific per your draw length for it. But well, the one thing that is really crucial is like the diameters. So for the string to be able to fit into the tracks, they've got to be the exact diameter. If they're too small, cause excessive vibration. If they're larger in diameter, they're going to wear out quicker because they're getting jammed up against the cable track or the cam tracks. If your center serving's too large in diameter, the nocks don't fit on very well. A good rule of thumb, if your nocks are too tight, which can cause some crazy tuning issues. Like I've had bows absolutely not tuned because the nocks were too tight, because the center servings were too large in diameter. But most knock manufacturers shoot for like a diameter of 0.112. So if you got a pair of calipers and you can measure, that's what it should measure. But a good rule of thumb to know if they're the right size is you should be able to snap your arrow onto the string, and it should be able to hang on the string by its own weight. So let's say your bow's pointed at the ground and you knock your arrow on. The tension of the knock should hold the arrow on the string. However, if you pull the string back like a half an inch and let it go, it should pluck right off the string. So if you don't have calipers, you don't have a way of measuring, you just want a good rule of thumb, snap them on there. It should be able to hold its own weight. And then if you should be able to pull the string back half inch and kind of pluck the string, and it should fire the arrow off.
Kevin, I've got a question here. Bowstring prices range so much. Is it directly related to the quality of materials within the bowstring?
It can. Like, some materials do cost quite a bit more than others. So you've got the material cost to build the string, and then also the labor or the time involved to build it. Like, I don't sell my bowstrings, like, so don't ask. Like, I love building them, but I'm not here to try to pitch you my bowstrings or sell you on the way I'm doing it, or to sell you the way I'm building bowstrings. But like, and some bows just cost more than others. Like, some bows have as much as 7 different bowstrings on one bow. That's going to cost quite a bit more than, you know, a bow that only takes 3 bowstrings to string it together, or even a recurve that takes 1. So, but let's say it's an apples to apples comparison. A guy's got brand X, Y, or Z or whatever, and he's trying to price them out. Yeah, you will see some fluctuation on prices between different builders. A lot of it's the amount of serving they use, or the materials, or just their time involved and how much they think they're worth. Some guys are new in it and they're just hungry and they want to build strings and make money off volume, and some want to do it off of. So it's just like anything in life. Like, you're going to find lowball string builders, and you're going to find some really high-end ones that you'll get what you pay for.
Got a question here from Kyleg_09. Need my first replacement strings. Best brands to look at.
So when you're looking at brands, like, I would consult with who will be installing the string. So if you're doing it yourself, you have all the tools and equipment to work on your own bows, man, that opens up a lot of options for you. If you're working with your local archery shop, you know, they probably have relationships built with and people they're buying strings from, or they may be building them themselves. I would probably go with what, you know, they recommend or what's working well for them. Building bowstrings isn't really that complicated. Like, with a little bit of practice, like, if you have all the right equipment, like, you can build a really good string. So there's not just one quality builder out there. There's a lot of them. Like, there's quite a few brands out there that I would consider shooting their strings if I wasn't building my own. And I know a lot of guys that are like me that just build their own and they do fantastic work. So, I would start that path of choosing what to go with based off of who's going to be putting them on, and start there.
Is it truly a function of, you know, who's putting it on could make all the difference in the world, compared to if someone that didn't know what they're doing could put the great bowstring on and it's not going to make that much difference?
Yeah, you look at a guy that knows his way around a bow, you know, when the strings come from the manufacturer and they're clipped to the exact spec. You know, a good bow tech is still going to take those strings and unclip them and measure them before he puts them on. Now, the bowstrings are what connect the bow together. They drive all of the factory specifications of a bow. So if you want your poundage to be on, if you want your draw length to be on, your let off, all of the important specs on a bow are completely driven by the length of the bowstrings. So a good bow technician will take the strings out of the package. They'll measure them first, and there's a certain way to measure them too. Like, the ATA standard is on a 1/4 inch peg with 100 pounds of tension, and not everybody has the equipment to be able to measure them exactly. And so they're just kind of going on faith that the guy that built the bowstring put everything where they're supposed to. But I see it all the time. Like, my guys posting on forums or on social, like, hey, my bow is, or I get a message from them, like, my bow is supposed to be 70 pounds and it's only going to 65. What could be wrong? Like, I pretty much guarantee you it's the strings. Or if a guy's got a 70-pound bow and for some reason it's hitting 75 and the draw length's way off, and like, it's usually driven by the strings. So I'm I'm really conscious to follow the manufacturer's, recommended length. That said, I'm not afraid to throw a few extra twists in the string or let a couple out just to get my draw length just right. So, and you can also do that with the cables. By adjusting the cables on bow, you can kind of fine tune things in. But, if you get an unexperienced bow technician that's working on your bow and they pull the strings out and they unravel or they untwist and they put, the bow won't be likely at spec and it won't be as good as it could be.
Let's talk about those twists. You talk about having, too many twists, too little twists. Where is the happy medium in the twist of the bowstring, and why is that important?
So if you look at a bowstring, at the served section, the protective wrap, then you have the exposed section that doesn't have the serving over the top of it. Now, as you twist those strings, the unserved section is going to take up most of the twist. So now the served section does twist up a little bit. It does tighten up. If you've got a bowstring that's like two colors and you serve it with white serving, it'll turn clear, and you'll see exactly what I mean. When you twist up the string, you'll see that most of the twist goes outside of those servings. Now, let's say somebody was careless as they're putting the bowstring on and it came untwisted. You've got all the material it has a certain twist rate under the serving, and then outside of the serving it's different. That string will spend the rest of its life trying to equalize to where it has the same twist rate throughout. And that's why a lot of the servings will come undone, or they'll become loose as you shoot the bow. And it also makes your peep sight twist like mad. So when I build my bowstrings, I lay my servings on super tight, like almost to the point the thread would break as I'm laying them on, and then backed off a little bit. I do that just for durability and consistency. So I don't have as much leeway of twisting a string one way or the other, and keep my peep sights true from rotating, like keep them from kind of getting a mind of their own. But I just make sure that I've got length before I lay the servings down. So yeah, that's why it's important to, not deviate too far off from the twist rate from when it was built to when it's on the bow.
Is there any relation to a left-handed or right-handed bow as to which way the string is twisted?
No, not necessarily. Like most bowstrings, the individual strands of material, as they come off the machines, they've got a natural clockwise, they've got a natural direction of twist, and I'm sure it could be different from one manufacturer to the other. So I always twist mine. I guess if you were to look down the string, I would end up twisting them clockwise to make them tighter. And I mean, you can build them one way or the other. It's been proven that, it has no relation to right-handed or left-handed. I know Parkinson Strings, he from up in Idaho, he did a series of tests to figure out what makes a bow, or which makes an arrow as you fire it, as it comes out of the bow, what makes it spin clockwise or counterclockwise. Because there's a lot of high-speed video floating around of somebody with a right helical fletched arrow, and they shoot it out of the bow, and it comes out of the bow spinning left, and as it gets out 4 or 5 yards out of the bow, the fletchings kind of take over, and they start spinning it the opposite direction that it naturally was coming out. So everybody's trying to figure out what causes this, what makes an arrow come out of the bow spinning left, or what makes it come out of the bow spinning right. So he went through a series of tests of twisting them left-handed or right-handed, and if I remember correctly, it was it kind of had a mind of its own. There was no definitive answer of what made that arrow come out of the bow spinning one direction or the other. End of the day, the easiest thing to do is find out which way your arrows are coming out of the bow and fletch them that direction. So for me, all my arrows come out of my bow, as I shoot, they always spin left, so I fletch everything with a left helical. And how you determine that, if you're wondering, you just take a bare shaft and index it, shoot it at point blank, and see which way the arrow is turning, and then step back another yard, shoot it again, and see if it went further, and then you'll get an idea of what direction that arrow is spinning as it comes out of the bow. So a lot of people have said over the years that it has 100% to do with the direction of twist on the string, and then some guys have proven it wrong, and then there's just so many other variables that cause it, like nobody really knows.
Let's talk about putting loops and such on the string. What kind of problems can that create for, a finely tuned bowstring?
So as far as like with the D loop, there's quite a few different materials out there. You have so like for a handheld release aid shooter, so somebody is holding their release in their hand. I think it's a better practice to go with a really soft, flexible material that's pliable, because as you draw back and your hand rotates into your anchor point, if you're using like a super stiff, rigid material, it'll twist the bowstring. And if you knock up an arrow with a broadhead and draw it back, and you twist your hand into your anchor point, and you see those blades on the broadhead changing position, you know that your D loop is twisting your string. I feel like that's unfavorable. I don't want my anchor, the way I hold my release is I come into position influencing that arrow. It's hard to tune, and it's going to open up your groups, and broadhead flight might get bad. I don't think it's conducive to accuracy. So for handheld users, I highly recommend soft, pliable, flexible material. I don't know if they're making it again. Brownell bowstring materials went out of business for a while, and I hear they're back in, but their LC material is what I really like to use. But that type of material doesn't work well with some like caliper type releases. Number one, like some releases have got a small enough gap that a thin material could slip through, and that obviously can be a problem. And it might not be as quick to load. Like some guys, want something that they can just without hesitation drop their release down, click it on the string. So for guys shooting an open jaw caliper release, you might want to go with a little bit larger diameter, a little bit stiffer material. Most wrist strap release shooters aren't, gripping hold of the release and twisting it as they come back. So the torquing issue isn't really a problem. But if, depending on what type of release you shoot, I think should drive what type of loop you should shoot. As far as the knot C-tie, I would suggest like 95% of the archery shops out there are using a cow hitch knot. Personally, I like the clove hitch knot. They look a little bit goofy if you're not used to them. Like a coworker, Justin Schaefer, I built his bow for him this year. He lives up in Alaska, and I shipped his bow up to him, and he's just shooting awesome, like the best he's ever shot in his life, and he's just really getting along well with the bow. Well, he posted a picture of the D loop on social media, and all these guys were like, "Oh, somebody tied your D loop wrong." Like, I tied it. I'm the one that tied it, and I use a cow hitch knot for a few specific reasons. And there are all these guys like telling me that I tie my D loops wrong, but I like the cow hitch knot.
Then you show them your gold medal.
Yeah, like you guys have one of these. In my shop, I've got like a stack of the big novelty, like Happy Gilmore checks from tournaments I've won and placed at.
You just take a quick photo of those, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just send it to you.
Tell me why you like that specific knot.
So, gosh, it'll be hard to put words to it. I think if you were to cruise through my Instagram, you'd probably see a few photos of where I've posted them. At any rate, I like that, and I'm typically shooting an open hook style release. Carter Quickie is what I use for hunting, and then for shooting matches, I usually use a handheld hinge or back tension type release. So I like the cow hitch, or the clove hitch rather, because the knock, like as I snap it on the string, I get nice even contact on the top of the knock. Now I only tie a knock set under the arrow knock. Some guys do them on top and bottom. I only do them on the bottom because that puts the release as I load up tension directly in line with the arrow. And so I get really flat contact on the top of the knock with the clove hitch. And it also, when you tie a cow hitch, the part that you hook your release onto leads off of one side of the string or the other. So typically you have to alternate the knots to get them to balance out. Or it's kind of, if you tied them both the same way, it'd be coming kind of off the side of the string. And so with the clove hitch knot, it pulls from the exact center of the string. It doesn't route off of one side of the string or the other. And I just feel like you get more contact of the D-loop material around the bowstring, so it doesn't pinch and separate your serving. I know a handful of professional archers that's all they use, and I probably picked it up from them somewhere along the lines, like Chris White in the UK. That's all he uses. Dave Cousins, sure you've heard his name. That's all he uses. I've exclusively tied that type of D-loop for the last 15 years. So that's just my style. That's the way I do it. Like all the local archery shops around here, home in Utah Valley, like if I work on somebody's bow and they walk into that shop, they can look right at the D-loop and like, oh, Kevin Wilkey tied that. Because I'm the only guy that ties them that way. Around here anyway. But no, and then at the end of the day, is it really going to make or break you if you have a cow hitch D-loop or a clove hitch? Probably not. Like, there's bigger things to be worried about, but you know, I'm always looking for those little gains in my setup, and I feel like it gives me a little bit of an advantage. Definitely not night or day. Like, I wouldn't be cutting your D-loop off right now to try it, unless you're in a position that you are in a test mode. But at any rate, that's how I do it. Maybe I'll post up some fresh pictures or send them to you, and then you can kind of, I don't know, guys can take a look.
Let's talk about bowstrings. All the different bow manufacturers, everybody's, you know, putting on bowstrings, but you always hear you want a custom bowstring. Talk about, have the companies over the years gotten better and better and better with the bowstrings that are, you know, provided on the bow, or is it necessary that people get custom bowstrings?
Well, back when I was a kid, when you'd buy a new bow and it would come with the string, my string building journey started with learning how to retie the center servings. And anybody that's been around as long or longer than I have, you know, if you bought a bow back then, it was a monofilament serving. So I'd be out shooting a field round or a 3D round, and like as it would wear down, it would like pop and it would zing, and the whole thing would come unraveled. And so, but then at that same time, a lot of companies like BCY and Brownell were coming out with like fast flight braided materials that you could use as a serving. And so it held a lot tighter and it wouldn't separate and it didn't wear out as quick. But man, I tell you what, you know, talking about those old monofilament servings, like nothing felt as clean as a freshly tied monofilament servings. Your knocks would slip on and just click. It was such a satisfying sound and feeling, but they weren't as reliable as the braided servings that we're using now. At any rate, so that was like the start of my string building journey. You know, as a kid, as I was be replacing those monofilament servings. And so as the years have rolled on, like everybody, like just competition drives, you know, people to be better. Like all the bow builders they may be using an aftermarket company to build them, or they're building their own in-house. Like most companies are building with top of the line materials, and they're building a fantastic bowstring. Like I've shot like this year in Vegas competition, I was shooting stock Hoyt strings. I think the only thing I changed was the center serving. You know, that's the one thing I won't trust anybody else. It's like the way I tie my center servings is like witchcraft. Like I have to, I don't trust anybody else's, and that is like the most critical patch of serving on the entire bow. Like the end servings could be a little bit loose, cable servings, roller guard, all that could be kind of so-so, not 100%. But I'm telling you, if your center serving is like loose or moving, good luck. Like it can be that can be devastating to, you know, accuracy on a shot. Like you'll be chasing your sights from start to finish. Is that D-loop slides up the bowstring. At any rate, kind of getting in the weeds, but a lot of the bow companies are building good strings. There's a lot of good bowstring builders out there. I don't really endorse any of them, but if I were, you know, I've known Eric Griggs for years, like competed with him while I worked at Hoyt. He was on Hoyt's pro staff. Like he's a great guy. He builds a fantastic bowstring. If I was going to go out and buy a bowstring right now, it'd probably be from him. And he runs gas bowstrings. And I'm not like, there's so many good builders out there. It's like finding a good mechanic. Like there's some good ones and there's some bad ones, but like if they're in business, they're probably, you know, like most of the string builders that are not that good at it, they're not going to stay in business. So a lot of good ones out there, and some are a little better than others, but I'm not afraid to shoot stock strings.
Okay. I've got one last question here on bowstrings, and you covered it a little bit, both, but I kind of want you to reiterate. It says, how often should I wax my bowstring, and how often should I change my string? You kind of covered both of those, but I want to go back to should people wax and how often to change. I mean, you said 5 shots, or it could be 10,000 shots. Is it one of those things that about every year should someone go into a bow shop and just have someone look at it, or how would the layman say, hey, I might need a string?
So let me talk about how often you should change again. Typically after the hunt is when your strings will look their worst. So at the end of the season, like going into the season, they should look pretty good, but just use those visual indicators I talked about. If you're seeing a lot of fuzz, wax won't fix it. If you're seeing serving separation, you should probably replace it. Like I had a set of strings on. It was a Hoyt Prevail 40. I built that bow in late 2016, and I shot the same set of strings for the whole life of the bow. It was a silver Prevail 40. And I bet you I put more arrows through that bow than most of the guys listening to this podcast have put in one of their, and there's probably a couple of guys that have shot more than me. But anyway, like I had put a ton of arrows through that bow. I didn't even keep track, but I shot the same set of strings for 3 years, and that's competing with it. Like I was using a Vectran blended bowstring, like a 452X, and when I sold the bow, the kid that bought the bow from me still using that same set of strings. They looked fantastic. Nothing wrong with them at all. Like I probably wore out the bearings before I wore out the set of strings on that. And the one thing I was really careful about, I never let them brush up against anything. My pant leg or my quiver, or I never touched them with my fingers, nothing. Like I just never touched them on anything. They never had a speck of fuzz on them, and they were a white waxless material that I got quite a while ago. So I had no wax on it, and they looked perfect, and they still do, as long as he's kind of keep shooting it the way I did. That's a lot. I mean, 3 years of a lot of shooting is I mean, they're probably, I don't know, depending on how much this guy's shot the bow since I sold it to him, it may be due for a new set, but the actual part of the shooting of the string doesn't really wear them out if your cams are in alignment. What wears them out is outside contact of, backpacks, ATV straps, rubbing, if you wax them and you're rubbing dirt into them. One thing I did talk about is, like, I'm sure people are wondering, like, well, how do you waterproof it? Well, there's already enough wax in the material from the building process that's made that string waterproof. If you're really worried about it, a test that I would do is soak them down, get them wet, like get a squirt bottle, simulate, a downpour, soak them top to bottom, and pluck them a couple of times, like something you would do while hunting, and shoot them at 20, 30 yards and see if it even changes. Every time I've tried that, it's never changed my sight settings at all. So, yeah, as far as the waxing them goes, like if you're a firm believer in it and it's something you've always done and you just don't want to get out of the habit of it, like keep doing what you're doing, but like know that they're like most professional archers out there shooting the circuit right now don't wax their strings. I'd probably say like 75% of them. You go to Vegas, you walk down the championship line and ask every guy there if he waxes his bowstrings. He'll probably tell you that they'll probably tell you that they don't. Now, I know that probably leads to the next question. Like, oh, that's not a hunting bow, that's a target bow. But competitive target archers are out in the same exact. I've shot tournaments in far worse conditions than I've hunted in. Rain, downpour. Like I've shot in wind in heat. Like I've done it all, and still I stand on it that I don't think it's necessary. And you'll read your owner's manual, and it'll tell you that you should. You'll talk to your string builder. He'll tell you that you should. Well, if that's important to you, listen to your string builder, listen to your manufacturer, but just know that there's a vast majority of professional archers out there aren't doing it. And it's not because they get free strings whenever they want. Also, when you apply a lot of wax to a bowstring and you get it all sighted in and you get out on a hot day and that wax liquefies, or like heaven, like forbid that you leave your bow in your car. I do it every once in a while on accident and it gets hot. Like that wax will just liquefy. Like I've had my sight settings change because of that. I've watched my bow going to Hungary, heading to the World Championships, sit on the tarmac. It was like 110 degrees outside in a black bow case, sit on the tarmac of the airport for like 6 hours just baking in the sun. And I got to Hungary, pulled my bow out, and I could tell it had been hot. Like the wax, what little wax was in there had kind of leaked out of the string. I stepped up on the line and sight marks were money. Like didn't have to change a thing. Now, if I had sighted in with wax and all that wax melted out, I could see that I would have had to change sight scales, or I would have had to done something to adjust for it. But anyway, for accuracy, consistency, and the longevity of the string, I feel like not waxing them makes them look better and it makes them last longer. Like I've seen bows come into the shops I've worked at. I get bows coming to me all the time. And I'm telling you, the nastiest looking strings that I ever see coming in are the guys that wax them all the time. They're like, I don't know why my strings look like crap, but I wax them all the time. I'm like, okay, I'm going to build you a new set, but try not waxing them this time. And when they come back, they're like, dude, I can't believe the difference it makes. They look so much better. Anyway, that's my personal experience with them. I'm not going to twist your guys' arms into not waxing your strings. You guys make the decision. The one parallel in another sport that I kind of liken this to are guys cleaning their gun barrels. Like I shoot PRS rifle competitions, and you talk to most of the good competitors there. They like, I hate cleaning my gun. It just screws them up. Like I never clean my rifle barrel. Like they clean the action and everything, but just like scrubbing the barrel clean, they don't do it. Anyway, that's kind of the waxing your bowstrings is kind of in the same camp as that.
Kevin, that's awesome. That's going to conclude our part one on bowstrings. We've got a slew of other questions. I encourage the listeners to check out part